Hey guys, this is Hayes with CheatSheetPros.com. Today's Friday, 12:30. We're going to take a look at some DFS stacks for the weekend. So one of the things I like to do is just do a quick YouTube video and walk through the NFL cheat sheet and kind of show you guys how I utilize it and the things I look at. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is our main tab on the NFL cheat sheet right now. It's got all the good information. We have our algo over here. We sort players top to bottom. As always, we have ownership projections, average points, value, all that good stuff. And you can see there's some more data over here. The Stacks tab, we're going to kind of go game by game, and I'm going to give you some plays that I like. This Stacks tab I use for same game parlays, which I've been absolutely addicted to the last 2 weeks since we've had access to them in our state. I also use this for sports betting, player props, prize picks, all that good stuff. And then down here we have our targets tab. And then this is going to show you the targets week by week. It's updated weekly, so you can see as the season progresses, it gets bigger and bigger, and it shows you all of the cumulative stats as well as week by week breakdown. We have, if you're playing prize picks, we have our breakdown of projections versus actual prize pick lines, so you can see the differences in these, which I will update again this afternoon. We have our quick stacks tab, which I'm going to walk through. And then if you play tiers, we have our tiers contest over here with all this lovely information. So let's go ahead and take a look at the quick stack tab. I'm going to flip through some of the stacks that I like, and there's 3 of them in particular that I do like, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to build a lineup with one of them so you can get an idea. I don't like giving out exact lineups because I don't want a bunch of people to put in the same lineup, so I want to give you some different options and some flexibility so you guys can figure out what you want to play. So if you've never seen this sheet before, this is our quick stack tab. What this does is it takes the quarterback and 2 other players, and it shows you the cost of the stack, what that stack's projected at, or value. Whoops. And then we have target, and then target cost per 1,000, and then their average fantasy points, average value for the players that you select over here. This is good for if you're just wanting to stack one team. Now, if you're playing a large field GPP, you want to run it back. So what that means is you want to have a quarterback and then usually 2 pass catchers and then run it back with 1 pass catcher or 1 player from the other side, and that's called like a mini game stack. The reason you want to do that is if that game turns into a shootout that's going back and forth, or it goes into overtime and they're going back and forth, you're getting points on each side. So it's similar to baseball when you're stacking, say, the 1 to 5 or 2 to 6 hitters. In football, we do the quarterback, 2 pass catchers, and then 1 from the other side, 1 player or whatnot. So this one is kind of self-explanatory up here. For this video, I am going to focus on the table down here. Now, some of the things on here, we still have the cost, projection, and stack value in these columns. Over here, we have our targets. And then we have our average fantasy points and then our ceiling. Now, our ceiling is the same as our average fantasy points because we've only had 1 week. Now, what's new over here that is not on the above, and this is what I love the most, is this shows you how much of the cap percentage you have left. So on DraftKings, it's $50,000. And this shows you the percentage of money left and the average amount per player, which is what I use a little bit more, as well as the team total. Excuse me. So, for example, if you want to stack, if you want a cheap stack and you've got some stud players, take this average amount of money left, sort it high to low, and these stacks up here are going to be your cheap stacks. So you can fill in absolute studs. You're going to have the most money left possible. And then if you flip it the other way, these are going to be your more expensive stacks that are going to be a little higher owned, a little chalkier. But depending on the flex players that you want to fit in there and who you want to play, you can decide if you want to look for a cheap stack or a stud stack. Excuse me. So when we go over here, we have our quarterback. And then our wide receiver 2, and opponent wide receiver 1. This is the default, so when I release the sheet, I've got 2 wide receivers and the opponent wide receiver 1. Now you can change these and flip these around. Now you see over here, there's this caret drop down where you can sort. That's not what we want. So if you click inside this box, you see a second caret pop up over here on the right side. click that drop down. Now you can move between the wide receiver 1, 2, 3, the tight end, or either of the running backs. So, for example, let's go stack value. We're going to sort this high to low. Of course, we got Buffalo, we got the Rams, we got the Broncos, we got Indy. So let's flip over here and just see what the fantasy points look like last week for the average. So we have a couple that shoot to the top. So Washington is the first one that I like. So I like seeing it up there. It's only 47% of the cap that we see over here, and it leaves us almost $6,000 per player left. So this is a good stack to start with. Now, when we look across here, this stack is 23.5, and that gives you Carson Wentz, McLaurin, Samuel, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love Samuel. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. McLaurin you could use, but he's a little expensive for the production he got in week 1. So I'm going to flip this down here to the wide receiver 3 because I want to see how much it is if I put Dotson in there. So I flip it down here. Now it changes over to Dotson. So this gives us Wentz, Dotson, Samuel, and Amon-Ra. So this is one of the stacks that I do like. And it drops to 21-1, which is really cheap. And it has the highest ceiling. So last week, this put up 4.3x of what their salary is today. So that was one of the highest on the slate. And it's not projected to be super high owned. That's only 42% of your cap space. And then that leaves you 65 left per player. So let's go ahead and build a lineup with this. And I'll kind of show you how this works. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start off with Carson Wentz. We're going to throw him in there. He's only 5,800. And then we got Curtis Samuel. He's only 4,600. He is super cheap. And then for this particular scenario, we're going to put Dotson in there because he's only 4,200. So this is fairly cheap right now. And we're going to run it back with Amon-Ra. And he's a little bit more expensive at $6,500. So this gives you a good start. So this is how I start building GPP lineups. So if I'm doing a 20 max, I typically don't use an optimizer. I hand build them. I enjoy that. So that's something good for me. If I'm going to do something with like 100 lineups, then you got to do an optimizer and get into a lot of the advanced settings, which I'm not going to do for this video. So this, for example, is a Washington stack. And we got our QB, 2 pass catchers, running it back with Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then I like to go ahead and plug a defense in that I can get in. So I scroll down here at the bottom and let's kind of flip through and see who potentially could be good. And I try to find one a little bit more expensive to put in my initial build. And then if I get a player I like, I can lower the defense and pump it up. So for this one, let's see who we got here. Kind of flipping through here. So the Steelers, they're playing New England. This should be a very low-scoring game. The Pittsburgh defense did look good last week, although they did lose what's-his-face to a rehab of a possible torn pec. But they're only $2,800, and they put up 26 points last week. So that's kind of a good $2,800. I'm going to throw them in there. If I need to go down, I can. But that leaves me $65.25 left per player. And if we look over here on the sheet, this means $65.25. So this cap over here, I just figure a $2,800 defense. So you can go down or you can go up from there, but it gets you kind of in the ballpark of where you want to be. So this gives us $65.25 per player to fill in 4 spots. So the next one I want to do is I want to go to tight end. Now, when I go over here and I look at this targets tab, we're going to talk about this real quick. Now, it's sorted by week 1, high to low. Typically, when I release the sheet, it's going to sort it from targets per game, and then it will list a column for each week. But you can see Adams, Chase, Cup, duh. Those are the most obvious ones, but you can also see the pricing over here. I have it color-coded. So red is kind of the nosebleed pricing. It's really high. You got your gold, which isn't bad. You know, it's fair. It's not the highest, not the lowest. The green is kind of where you want to look. That's where you're going to get your value players. And the blue, I wanted to stick out like a sore thumb. Those are going to be your very inexpensive players that are getting a lot of production. So, well, might not necessarily be production, but they're getting a lot of targets that could turn into production. So I play on DraftKings. So if I'm just looking down here, all of a sudden I've got 4 guys who are in the blue who are getting a lot of targets. So this first one is Kyle Phillips for Tennessee. He went 6 for 66 last week, had 9 targets. So if you've got an absolute flex spot that you need to punt someone cheap, you know, look at putting someone like that in there. Dortch for Arizona got 7 targets. He's damn near min price. Brown, they lost Dak. I'm not worried about him. Hayden Hurst got a surprising 8 targets, went 5 for 46 at only 3,600. But the one that jumps out at me, I look down this position column, and the top tight end that I noticed, and I went out and picked him up in season-long leagues, is Tyler Higby. Tyler Higby's only $4,200 on DK. He got 11 targets last week. Now, with those targets, he only caught 5 of them and went 5 for 39, so he didn't show up on a lot of radars because he didn't show up with a lot of fantasy points. But 11 targets, that was a pretty good percentage of the target share. I forget if it was like 25 or 30% target share for his team, but it was significant, and so that's someone that I want to look at. So for this example of building a lineup, I'm going to put Higby in there. And there's a few options you could go, if I could spell it right. So we got Tyler Higby at $4,200. That's a modest price tight end. Now, this is the sweet spot. So this is our base lineup. We have $7,300 left to fill these 3 spots. Now, this is where you can mix and match. So in some contest, if you can do 20 lineups, I will build a stack just like this, and I will duplicate this 5 times and then flip-flop all of the stud running back, stud receiver, and the flex and kind of move it around. So let's look and see kind of what we can do with $7,300 per player. Let's do some different examples. So Saquon Barkley is someone that I absolutely love, so we're going to put him in there. Let's go take a look at Saquon. Now, over here on the Stacks tab, I'm going to flip to this now and show it to you because I'm going to show you why I like Saquon. So let me flip down here. Got the New York Giants. And if you're new to this, you click inside this home team, your carrot drops, you pick the team, and then it will flip and change everything. And we've got everything on here from our own power rankings, the team rank line, PFF projected line, our cheat sheet pros. We have 2 lines. This is the one I'm kind of focusing on. This one doesn't have enough stats yet, but it gives you an idea of kind of where it's headed. We have our trench finder where you can see O-line versus D-lines, and then 5 to 10 yard, 10 plus yard runs and power run plays. That's good when looking at running backs. We have our stats over here. We have our schedule with results and then projected lines for future games. And then someone in the chat wanted to add passing rushing play percentage, so I brought that in over here so you can see how often a team is running or passing and then how that ranks for the NFL. Down here we have roto projections, we have PFF projections, and then ownership numbers, and then we got DraftKings, FanDuel split out in the fantasy points. And then down here, this is our fantasy point production tracker. Each week you see the fantasy points. So here, looking at this, Baker Mayfield had 19 points last week, and they're color-coded by X value to get an idea of how they did. So the one that jumps out that we're going to talk about for this is Saquon Barkley. He led the team. He had 36.4 points. He looked really good. He had some runs where he lowered his shoulder and absolutely plowed the opponent linebacker and knocked him down. So he looks healthy. He's going to be someone exciting that we can look at. So a couple of things that jump out at me when I'm looking at this. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. The Giants don't really jump out on offense, but down here, this run-pass play, so they ran at the 3rd highest clip at 55% running plays. So that was the 3rd best in the NFL. And there's no one behind Saquon. He's getting the majority of these catches. My second favorite stat that I love looking at is right here, this allowed yards per rush attempt. And you can see I double boxed it instead of these singles because I wanted it to be big and substantial for people to see. Now you can see, now given this is only 1 week of data, so if you see something crazy, know like, hey, this is going to kind of even out once we get going. But allowed yards per rush attempt, Carolina gave up 5.6 yards per rush, and that ranks 27th in the NFL. So that is very good for Saquon Barkley this week and what's coming up. Looking at this, they don't have a good O-line, but they did a good job getting Saquon out in space, so I do like that. And then as you look at the 5 to 10 yard runs, the 10 plus yard runs, and the power runs, the Giants tail off from 7th to 17th to 20th to 21st, and that is good for Saquon. Now, excuse me, oh my gosh. So flipping down here, Saquon's only $7,300. He is going to be a little higher owned, but we're focusing on the stack that's maybe a little lower owned and filling in some studs. So Saquon is one of the guys that we really like. So I'm going to plug Saquon in here at $7,300. He fits nicely. Jonathan Taylor, I don't like as much. He's $9,900. If you're playing a cash game, Jonathan Taylor is fine. But if you're playing a large field GPP, you really need 4x. You need to be able to obtain 4x value, and I just don't know if he can do it at that price point. And if you don't get it from your high-priced guys, that puts more pressure on your lower-priced guys to get up there. So we're looking at Jonathan Taylor, which he's projected 88% chance of a TD, 95 rushing yards, 20 receiving yards, but he's $9,900. So for 4x, you need almost 40 DK points, which is an absolute ton. Now, last week, he had an amazing game, and he got 30 DK points. So 3x is good, but that's not good for a GPP where you need to knock out 100,000 people and get an edge. And then just looking at this with his ownership, I look at these numbers and ownership changes. There's a lot of variance in it. So I say this number to double. So I would say 10 to 20% ownership for Jonathan Taylor would be something reasonable. So you can see like Hines at 2.2. I'd say, okay, he's probably 2 to 5% owned. So with the ownership, I would probably pivot away from Jonathan Taylor. So we have our stack. We have Saquon Barkley. Now these other running backs in here, we can put in Joe Mixon. If you put in Joe Mixon, that leaves $7,400 for your flex. You can put in Nick Chubb if you think he's going to run all over the Jets. That leaves you $7,500 for your flex. There's so many different ways you can go. I love Fournette this week. I need to look and see why he's questionable. The Saints gave up a bunch of yards on the ground. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one real quick, because I think the Saints have owned Tampa Bay, and so this is a game Tampa Bay really wants to win. But you look here, the Saints, yeah, they were 5.3 yards per carry last week, 25th. Now, keep in mind, it's only one game, but Fournette looked really good, and going up against this defense, they could run quite a bit. Flipping back over here, let's say we put Fournette in there, and then that leaves us $7,900 for a flex. So we can put in Debo, Kamara, Mixon, Chubb, Tyreek, pretty much anybody that you want. Now, if we take Fournette out, let's go down a little bit more, because there's a lot of mid-priced guys that I like in this range. One of the ones that really jumps out at me, I'm still trying to figure out the Robinson-Etienne split. Etienne missed an easy catch, would have been a touchdown last week, which would have gave him a huge boost. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, we don't really know what is going on there. That was a shock. Henderson got that much workload in week 1, so I'm going to stay away from that. But one that does jump out at me is Jamal Williams, and I'm trying to scroll down here and find him. I think I just slid over him. Not Jamal Williams, Javonte Williams, I'm sorry. So, Javonte Williams, okay? So, let's take a look at him. So, he's a little bit cheaper at $6,500. Now, what I liked about Javonte is he was running really good. He only had 43 yards last week. He was 7 of 43, but he averaged 6.1 yards per carry. I was blown away why Denver did not just pound the damn ball more and they let Russell Wilson throw as much as he did. He looked fine, but when you're getting 6 yards a carry and you only give it to him 7 times, I know Melvin Gordon had more rushes, but still, work that down the field. But what I really like, especially on a site like DK where it's PPR, he had 11 catches on 12 targets for 65 yards. So he had 20.8 DK points, which is about 3.5x value. And that was only 7 rushes and did not include a touchdown. And that also takes off his lost fumble. So he very easily could have went up over 30. And at 6,500, you need 26 points for 4x. He could get over that number. So he's got some room where he could have a really good game and go over that. So I like Javonte Williams if you want to plug him in there with Saquon. And then you come down here to the flex. Now that gives us 8,100. Now we can get up here to this little Jamar Chase guy who's an absolute stud. So Chase, he fits in there perfect. I always save the flex for last. So if I can get it in here, last week he was absolutely amazing. 16 targets, 10 grabs, 129 yards. Caught a touchdown, could have easily had another touchdown, 31.9 DK points. So he's right at that 4x mark. At 8,000, 4x, we need 32 points. He had 31.9 last week and still missed a second touchdown that he could have had. So he's got some wiggle room where he could even get over and above that. So this is a lineup that I really do like. I don't mind it for cash games either because it gives you a stack. Washington and Detroit, they're going to put up some points. That's one of the games I like taking an alt over on. And then you've got Barkley, Javonte Williams, and Jamar Chase in there. You can't really go wrong with that. If you want to flip it around and say you're doing cash and you want to go Barkley and Jonathan Taylor, that still gives you 4,700 down here in the flex, and then you can kind of buzz down here. And let's see who we got at 47. Dameon Pierce, he could be sneaky, but that's more GPP. You could throw Hawkinson in there. Actually, Hawkinson wouldn't be bad because that would give you 2 on the run back for the stack. Ertz, Olave, he's out. So I'd have to flip through here and kind of find some good sneaky players when you get down this low. But this is one of the things that I recommend utilizing the cheat sheet for. And let me flip through here and just show you a couple of things. So Casey already played. We got Baltimore, Cleveland. One of the things with Cleveland that jumps out at me, they had the #1 rushing offense last week, and they likely will continue that with Jacoby Brissett. You can see over here their O-line for just O-line versus D-line and 5-yard to 10-yard runs versus the defense allowed. That's a huge edge over to Cleveland, so I don't mind Nick Chubb. I think he's going to get a lot of work. You can also see here they ran at the 7th highest clip last week, so Nick Chubb's not a bad play. Detroit, Washington, we already talked about. Look at this. Washington gave up 6.8 yards per carry. Can anyone say DeAndre Swift could have a massive game? And then Detroit gave up 5.5, but Washington really doesn't run that much, and Antonio Gibson's old as hell, so he's not doing much. Indy, Jacksonville, I don't mind stacking either one of these teams. If you want to look for another contrarian stack and you want to get away from some of this Jonathan Taylor ownership, one of the things you could do is go Matt Ryan, Michael Pittman, and I believe that was on one of our stack tabs. Yep, yeah, so they were the number 2 stack that I was going to talk about. So when you look at this, look how cheap this is. Oh, hang on, I got my wide receiver 3. Let me flip this back to 1. Okay, so now this is a little better. So we're looking across here. We have Ryan, Pittman, Paris Campbell, Kirk, 21.6. Solid value last week, only 43% of the cap, still leaves 64, and has a team total of 25 and a quarter points. That's really good. Paris Campbell, I don't really care for, so I would do a Matt Ryan Pittman stack, run it back with Kirk. So let's build one of those lineups real quick so you can get kind of an idea. Say Matty Ice, and then Pittman was an absolute stud last week. And then let's run it back with Kirk. Now when I'm looking at this, now this puts the stack on my radar. Now if you love this side, like I don't like Pittman, I'm only going to run 2 because Pittman gobbled up all the targets. But say you don't want to use Christian Kirk, you want to see who else you can do. Flip over here to the 2, okay. Well, if you go to Zay Jones, it drops it to 20,200. If you go to Marvin Jones, it drops it to 20,300, so I'd rather go Zay. And then if you want to go the tight end, some teams use their tight end a lot. You go over to Ingram. That drops you down to 19.5, but he hasn't got a lot of use, so I probably don't like that. And even if you want to see what it looks like to run it back with the running back, you know, you could do James Robinson at 21.5, so it gives you some options there to play with, which I think is key. And then let's look like, so right here, Pittman put up 30.1 DK points. No other receiver really did anything. Neither did the tight end. So Pittman, I think, is your solid guy to go with. This offense is built around Pittman and then Jonathan Taylor. So if you're not going to play Taylor and you want to go Matt Ryan and Pittman, I mean, that stack, those two alone would have gave you 50 points last week, which isn't terrible. And then run it back. Kirk was the biggest one last week. He's been getting a lot of targets. And you can even run it back with James Robinson. He put up 20 DK points and give you something a little bit different. So let's do Matt Ryan, Pittman, and Kirk. So we're going to do a mini stack. I'm not going to run it back with 2 because this isn't too crazy. And just for numbers' sake, let's go ahead and put Higby in here at the tight end. Defense, I'm just going to put Steelers in there so you kind of have some room to mess with. So this gives us 4 spots to fill, and it gives us 62.75. So let's flip through here on our running backs. Let's say we use Saquon in the last one. So say we drop down. Let's do Fournette in this one, and then let's find another guy down here a little bit cheaper, and then we can beef up our receivers. And here, before we do this, let's go over to wide receivers, and let's find someone that we really like. So, I mean, you could get away Kupp, Adams, Chase. Kupp's 9,900. It's really hard to get a lot of value there. Amon-Ra's not bad. The Denver receivers aren't bad. But let's say Davante Adams. We just saw what Kansas City did to Arizona. They absolutely murdered him in the air and threw for 5 touchdowns. So let's say Derek Carr has a good game. So we're going to put Adams in there. And that leaves us about $5,000 to fill in our other 2 places, giving us Fournette and then a stud receiver. So let's see if we can go ahead and build something here. Flipping around here. Jeff Wilson Jr. So he's a sneaky little running back. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Seattle-San Francisco matchup. So when you're trying to fill in these spots, typically what I do is I flip through every game and I take notes. Offensive, defensive line, yards per carry given up, just to kind of give me an edge on something. So when I flip over here and I looked at this, I noticed Seattle gave up 5.2 yards per carry last week. And San Francisco, sorry, my throat's getting dry, needs to run the ball because Trey Lance looks awful right now. But it was a weather game, so I'll give him a break. So Jeff Wilson is projected to be the lead running back, although that's always kind of tricky when you get into what they could possibly do. But he's in a good spot. A team that ran at 55% of the time, so they ran the second most against the team giving up 5.2 yards per carry. You could slide Jeff Wilson in there at $5,000. I mean, 80 yards and a touchdown, that's going to give you 3x. That's not really going to kill you. And then you got flex for $4,700. So I'm going to flip down here, and in a case like this, if I don't like anyone in this range for $4,700, I'm going to take this defense. I'm going to drop down here and say, okay, who's a reasonable punt defense? I don't want to go against the Rams, Denver, Bengals versus Dallas. Yes, we could definitely go that route. Cooper Rush didn't look phenomenal. Dallas struggled with Dak, so Cincinnati could have a big bounce back game here. So if you want to drop down and punt defense, I would go that route over expecting Atlanta to shut down the Rams. And then that gives us up to $5,300 for our flex play. So that's going to move us up to, Robbie Anderson wouldn't be bad. Breece Hall, Michael Carter. I'd probably go Michael Carter. Excuse me, Jesus. Michael Carter last week, surprisingly, he had 7 of 9 for 40 yards. So he had 7 catches. That's 7 points right there. So that's like 1.3x his actual salary. And then he had another 10 rushes for 60 yards. He was averaging 6 yards a carry. So you could put him in here. If you don't want to do him, and you want to put Breece Hall in, he only had 6 carries, but he also had 9 targets. I mean, both of these guys, it was unreal how many targets they were seeing. So this would give us like a Matt Ryan stack with Pittman, run back with Kirk, and then we filled it in with Fournette, Davante Adams, and then our value we went with Jeff Wilson and Michael Carter. So you could put together a lineup like this, mix and match it. But anyways, these are kind of how I build lineups, and I'm going to go ahead and save that one. Limit salary exceeded. What? Remaining salary 100. All right, I'll figure it out later. But anyways, those are some of the lineups that I like to build. Jacksonville is another sneaky stack. Let's look at that one real quick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this video up and get on to digging into some player props. So when you're looking at this, if you want to flip over to the other side, Indy was really good against the Russ, but their short and deep pass defense suffered a little bit, so it wasn't quite as good. But what I love about this is Jacksonville threw 71% of the time, and that was the 5th highest, so they're eventually going to have success. So you take Trevor Lawrence over here. He's only $5,300. He's projected to be lower owned. And then you can put Kirk on there, and I love running it back with Pittman because if Jacksonville does go nuts and get some points, Pittman's going to be the go-to receiver on that side. Anyways, that's kind of what we got. So take this quick stack tab, break down, kind of see what you come up with. You can tinker with this and get a lot of stuff. Looking at the targets, you can find a lot of value plays that you can mix and match and put in your player pool, especially if you're using an optimizer. And then as always, use this quick stack tab, flip through the games, and just kind of do a little bit of research and put some stuff together. And good luck, guys, and see you on the other side.